Twitch has accepted the stream.
Great.
YouTube has accepted the stream.
And Dr. Sinha, Dilip, I want you to meet Sameria. I haven't really introduced her properly.
Nice
Sameria.
meeting you.
Facebook has accepted the stream.
Wonderful.
Okay, are you ready to start the show?
Yes.
Yes, we
See
are.
where the timer is on the screen, Sameria?
Yes.
Okay, when it says on the air, you are on the air.
Okay.
And then, and I
Do I
need
have to do
I
the whole
still need
clapper
to.
thing?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I got to
And I
send.
still need-
send Vicky the link.
I still need the link. Yeah, to just.
All right.
Yeah,
Don't do anything yet,
Sure.
Sameria.
just 1 sec. Yeah.
Dr. Sinha, I'm a host in training. I'm becoming a host, but I'm still in training.
So and So and I'm going to ask you to also try to speak up a little bit. I found it a little hard to hear you, but I don't know how much of that is just me, too. So I'm turning up my sound. But just if you're near the microphone, that will probably help a little. That's good.
Stepping close to the microphone.
We just want to see you too. Yeah, wonderful, perfect, great. And I hope you have water if you need it.
Oh, I'll walk out.
Okay.
Turn the video off.
Right. No, don't do that. We need you.
I sent you the text.
Okay, wonderful. Okay. Okay. And wonderful. Okay, next. Okay. Okay.
Can I start the show?
Yes, you can.
Okay, you see where the
Please.
countdown is, Sameria?
Yes.
All right, here we go.
Welcome to Talking Peace at Western New York Peace Center, being recorded here at Think Twice Radio in the home of the future and also the home of Richard Ricca. Thank you, Richard. We also thank our friends at WBNY, Buffalo's original alternative radio show, 91.3 FM, coming out of Buff State. Thank you to our friends at Buff State. And also, as we're being thankful, I'm going to give the floor to Vicky so she can do something called the Ganonyo, or a land acknowledgement, which is something traditional to the Haudenosaunee and the Seneca.
Well, the land acknowledgement is the first part, is just to say thank you, first of all, so much, Sameria, for being here, for hosting the show. And the only thing is that for the land acknowledgement, just to say that we are on, all of us, I think, sitting on stolen Haudenosaunee land, land of the Seneca, the keepers of the Western Door. And then the other thing that we like to do sometimes is to follow their wonderful example of the indigenous wisdom that here in this place, people would, the Seneca people would start every day and every event off by giving thanks. So giving thanks to Mother Earth, giving thanks to all of the creatures that are, the swimming, four-legged and flying creatures, the wonderful plants that are so important, our grasses, our nutritional plants, our medicinal plants, and the knowers of those plants who help us with healing. And
water.
And the water, of course, the living water. See, you could be doing this yourself. We can't forget the water. Water is life. Mini Wachoni, water is life. And all the beauty in our world, the mountains and the rocks, the trees that give us the very air we breathe, and all of the brother sun and grandmother moon, all the creation really, including the love that makes it all possible, and the creator, the very creator. And so we just hope that we would follow the original instructions so that life can continue in this creation. And then the person would say Yahweh to give thanks and acknowledging, and then the people would say no.
No.
So, no. So that's all, and that's the traditional opening for the Haudenosaunee.
Thank you so much, Vicky. Today we are going to have a talk on the topic of remembering Gandhi, and also this will be aired on October 2nd, which is Gandhi's birthday, and also UN declared Day of International Nonviolence. So I'm very thankful for the guests we have here. Thank you so much, Dr. Sinha, who is at the Research Institute researching the Roswell Cancer Center, and also a member of the Hindu Cultural Center as well. And also thank you, Vicky, for being a guest on this show, even though you're usually the host. Vicky, as you guys know, is the board chair of Western New York Peace Center, and I'm really excited to get into this topic of remembering Gandhi's life, and also talking about his grandson, who is closely related to this as well. And as always, we start off with values that are pertaining to Gandhi's life and the topic of nonviolence. So I'll just start with Vicky. Maybe you can tell us some of the values you have concerning this topic.
Well, I can't help using the usual ones that my go-to ones are truth and love, which makes me think of Gandhiji so much. So Gandhi, he talked about satyagraha, truth-seeking, as the highest order of things. And so truth is so important. And, of course, love, we were just talking about love. So that truth is important so that we see what we're trying to look at, however big and however multifaceted the issues. And then love is the motivator. It's the what gives meaning to life. It is the really creation of life is that love. Yeah. And that is our so those are two values that I think of and the great love that was shown by the activism and the courage of both Gandhis.
Yeah.
And so many wonderful truth seekers.
Love is the thing that binds all things together. So I love that is your value that you want to bring to the table. And Dr. Sinha, what about you? What are some values that you think are important for today's discussion?
Thank you. Let me correct a little bit myself. I am not actively at Roswell Park right now. I've been there for 30 years, and I'm happily retired.
Yes. As you deserve.
Being from India, I've been interested in Gandhi, of course, Mahatma Gandhi. I kind of say I had the fortune of seeing Mahatma Gandhi brief. I was a little boy, for 6th grade, 7th grade probably, and Gandhiji was traveling on a train, and as usual, what he used to do, he would stand, and he would always, I remember he would always travel in those days they called third class. In the British time, they had different classes of railway coaches. First class, second class, first class, only the British can travel. But Mahatma Gandhi is with the common people, so he would travel in the third class. And third class was open door, and he would always stand in the door so that people can at least have a glimpse. And so I went to the rail station with my brother, and that's Gandhi. And everybody was, I kind of didn't have that much of realization of what the power he is and what the powerful importance his movement and for the gaining of independence in India.
Yeah.
Later on, when I realized and they saw how powerful is nonviolence is, I mean, it is hard to understand before Gandhiji. It was good people couldn't realize that nonviolence can be that powerful. I mean, people would think, okay, if you hit me, I'll hit you double, so that I can retaliate, and then you will be scared of me. But tolerating, not doing anything, can be that powerful. Gandhi actually discovered that. And he discovered that when he was in South Africa. And he imported that to India. And that worked. That powerful British, which would not leave a rule for 300 years, and they had to leave just because of the powerful nonviolence. So today, of all, actually, I would like to say that nonviolence is very important because of the world is full of violence.
Yes.
All the people, like we was state supported or not supported, that is violence everywhere. All the non-violence, this power of non-violence, we should practice, and we should really understand the power of non-violence.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, that was so powerful. And some of the values that I took from what you just said is how humble Gandhi was, even in his own country, to sit in third class, even though he had the respect to go in a higher class. And his what he experienced in South Africa, and the discrimination and the racism, and how he saw how colonialism affected the indigenous people there as well, and how he brought what he experienced in South Africa, and how the movement really began after he came back from South Africa, and how nonviolence is so important, and being able to choose to not choose retaliation when you have been inflicted violence on yourself. I think it's all in our nature to choose to be violent when someone inflicts violence on ourselves, but him deciding to, when someone slaps him on the cheek, he turns his left cheek and he doesn't retaliate, and that takes a strong person to do so. So those are really great values that you bring to the table. And I think some values that come to mind for me is being like just choosing, having reflective choice. We have to be really thoughtful in our decision makings, and the thoughts that we have are really powerful, and that we have to be very careful what we do with our thoughts and how we act upon them.
Yes.
So for me, I think I want to value for this conversation is reflective choices that we can implement in the world, choices that lead to a nonviolent future, that lead to peace, that lead to reconciliation and understanding, which I think that Gandhi was really trying to aim for, and also liberation for people to decide, the self-determination for people to decide their own future in their own country. So that was amazing. Thank you guys for your input on that. And we have already started talking about Mahatma Mohandas Gandhi. For those who don't know, what does Mahatma mean?
Well,
Of
course, go please.
Mahatma is Atma is soul, the great soul.
Okay.
That's the title affectionately people gave Mahatma, because this great soul he had, and that's whenever I think about Gandhi, those things. I was growing up in India those days, and I was a child. I didn't really realize what's happening. But after I grew up, I started, I should say, meditating on Mahatma Gandhi, seeing what he did. It is enormous. If you think about it, the thought, his intellectual power. peaceful yet powerful. The final the straw on British government at that time, the rulers, the people who were suffering, the final straw was they call salt movement, the Dundee movement. That was the final straw, because look at it, how simple. He walked from one side to 250 miles. He walked, just walk, and nothing, villages after villages. And then they saw him walking and they joined him. How simple way to gather people, how simple way to bring in the message to people's mind. And after he walked 247 miles, he had thousands and thousands of people walking with him. He didn't even ask them to do it. People saw him, he was walking. So that's what, and the powerful is nonviolent. The movement at the end is we will make salt from the seawater. The British had a high tax on salt for the poor, but ocean water is free. I can make salt from the ocean water. The British doesn't want that. So it says, okay, you want to beat me up? Okay, do that. And there were hundreds of people were really tortured, but one batch goes, the second batch is right there. There is no violence. And finally they realized, the whole world realized that what powerful this non-violent, non-resistance. Okay, you hit me, all right, the next batch will come in. Yeah. One batch falls down, the second batch comes in. This is powerful. So this power of non-violence, this we should realize today. Violence against violence leads nowhere. So we have to practice, we have to propagate the non-violence in this society today.
Absolutely. And he was such a leader. He was such the father, really, of the nonviolence movements, of which there were so many. And in fact, there's a wonderful movie called A Force More Powerful that talks about, Gandhiji and how his nonviolent movement did result in the British leaving, because the power of that example, of that courage. And of course, Dr. King was the one who said, nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people, because it takes the courage to have that strength. It's not being passive at all. Nothing passive about it. When he actively walked, and he told, and another thing which we learned, and have done, is, he told people exactly what he was going to do. He wasn't trying to surprise anybody or trick anybody, or, he would tell exactly what he's going to do, and then he would do it. That he said, I have the right to do this. This is right. This is right for me to walk to the sea and make the salt water. You can call it illegal or not illegal, but, to him it was needed. It was, the thing to do. And he was such a master of such a master of nonviolence and vision and courage and strategy. His strategies were because they worked both from the point of the principles, because his principles were sound of justice, and then his standing by principle made him have the strength to do things that were wise and fruitful. So and again, his example. So I was just mentioning that film. So there are other examples. So the civil rights movement in the U.S. that followed, because of course Dr. King studied Gandhi, and then pardon.
Nelson Mandela.
And Nelson Mandela, yes, that's another one that's in the movie. Nelson Mandela's wonderful example, which and then the Danish people who all decided to wear if the Nazis were making the Jews wear Star of David, they would all wear Star of David. So the whole population. And then what was and the last one was Solidarność, the nonviolence of the Polish workers when they
Solidarność.
yeah. So it's like solidarity in Polish.
Oh, okay.
It's solidarity, Solidarność. So anyway, he was such a great teacher and such a brilliant person, and not a perfect person. I don't think that he would ever. In fact, he would be the last to claim it. So what you said about his humility, I know when he wrote his autobiography and he talked about all his mistakes and things, imperfections, and people said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "This is exactly what I need to do." So that humility and the sharing and the acknowledging that he's a human being.
Yeah.
But he's such a great soul. And that great soul, the humility is a huge part of it. I just want to say, when I was in India, when I was blessed to go to India, just very briefly, I was in Delhi, right before his birthday. So the first and second, and on the second, I was actually at Vandana Shiva's Nandavya farm. So where she was going to have the Women's Biodiversity Conference, very much informed by Gandhiji, and back to that speaking truth to power and doing, justice principled action for the people, for the people. But anyway, so they're getting everything all set so that it's going to be a great big celebration on his birthday. And I did get to go to the Gandhi Institute and to the Ghat where he was cremated.
That's good.
And then there was the last place, and I didn't get to go in there, but there was one place of Gandhiji that was what they put up. There was a military school right across the street, and I want to say I felt that feeling that I've had in many other places, including in Jerusalem or in Washington D.C., where we have things that remind us of the finest things, the most wonderful things, and then we have the examples of how we're not fulfilling those examples, So anyway, I just want to say that his teachings are so important, and they inform us in all of our actions, our nonviolent direct action, all over the world.
Thank you, Vicky, for sharing your trip to India and also highlighting how the Salt March was something that India as a collective had to do and move towards collective action. And also there was other movements that Gandhiji was a part of, and I think it was like the homespun cotton.
Yes.
To find self-reliance in India and not depend on their colonizers. So do you guys want to talk a little bit about that and about the other movement with the home woven, how people he would also carry around a spinning wheel to make his own, and it's amazing how he got a lot of other people, like what a brilliant mind to get other people to join in with him and oppose systematic systems of power with nonviolent action. So it's very interesting, and I think that is something we can all learn, carrying out our vision into the world. We don't have to do it by violent means. It can be through peaceful means as well. And I think
peaceful means actually, the way he did the thing, you practice yourself, what he believed in. That's what problem is today. Our leaders say something and do something differently.
Right.
They don't believe what they say.
Right.
But Gandhiji's thing was he believed in what he said. He practiced
Right.
what he advised. So when he said, okay, homespun cotton,
Right.
then he meant it. He did his own spinning wheel. He did his own cotton and weaved, had the weaved. And as a result, what happens, it caught on. Everybody is proud to do that. Everybody feels like, okay, because he's so honest. He's so
Right.
sincere. So that when you see someone, a leader, who is sincere, he does what he says. That's what you want to follow. That's what Gandhiji was. He was sincere and he
Yes.
believed what he said. He did what he said.
Yes.
And that's the whole India. They followed him and they're proud to follow him. That's what it was.
So, it's making me think of really sort of weaving into, I know that you want to talk about Arun Gandhi, also, who, Arun Gandhiji, I can still say, because he was also such a wonderful leader in nonviolence. And the Gandhi Institute at the University of Rochester is something he founded. But I was blessed to meet him twice, and I also heard him talk about this on some kind of an interview as well. So one of the things he said is that Gandhiji, his grandfather, had taught him to examine, and he did this every day, to examine what was happening, around him in terms of violence, and that he should categorize the violence, that it's one branch or the other of, it's either
Passive.
physical violence of hitting or killing, pushing, anything, or it is non-physical violence. That is name calling, lying, hurting, demeaning, disrespecting, maligning, lying about a person, all of those, that he should categorize them like that. And what he found was that, of course, there is much more of the non-physical violence that goes on. And what we used to do with, and often do with any kind of nonviolence training, is thinking about, the violence escalator, where it starts off with the tone of voice or the nasty word, and then it's escalating, step by step until it does break into actual violence. But so he encouraged people to think so much more about how poverty is a violence, how so many of these other, that when people's rights are violated, when their respect for them as a human being is violated, when the prejudice, in fact, this is back to the love, the value of love, when people are treated differently because of some kind of other characteristic, whether it's an actual physical characteristic or even, income levels or even, race, ethnicity, caste, gender, religion, any of it, that those were all violence, violence against the people. And he was so working against he so wanted the unification of India, and that was a heartbreak. And of course he was assassinated.
Right.
And I when I think of Arun Gandhi and just how completely he imbibed his grandfather's example, taught his grandfather's teachings, and took the same brave stances. I know he got very criticized. He just passed away, just by the way,
In May this year.
Yeah. So he got in a lot of trouble with people over his stance about Israel and Palestine for speaking out on that issue.
One quote from Gandhi before we move on to his grandson. He says that we may never be strong enough to be entirely non-violent in thought, word, and deed, but we must keep nonviolence as our goal and make strong progress towards it. So remembering that, well, at least my value of monitoring your thoughts and how your
Right,
thoughts can
right.
also lead to
Yes.
violent actions, either passive or physical violent actions. And that is so important. And then Arun Gandhi, who founded, him and his wife founded the Gandhi Institute of Nonviolence, which is actually in Rochester, an hour away from here.
Actually,
Go ahead.
Yes.
Arun, I had the fortune to know him personally.
Wow.
He came to Buffalo 2007. Catholic Charities, they invited, I think Peace Center was also involved.
Yes.
And I got involved in that. So I was, from the beginning, I was very involved. And I invited him to our temple for a lecture. And actually, he had dinner with us in our house. So we really got into personal. And he's a year younger than me, and so that way we were very close. We got into personal things. So one thing, interestingly, he told me that when he was grade school little boy, he visited. Actually, he was brought up in South Africa. When he was very little, Gandhiji moved to India, and then he went to India to visit him and stayed for a couple of years with him in the same Sabarmati ashram and the hermitage here Gandhiji had. So Arun said what his grandfather made him do: wake up in the morning, have breakfast, and go into the neighborhood area where there are day laborers and all sorts of, working people, and go to their areas and play with their children. So he said the idea was from a childhood, because he was brought up in a well-to-do family, says he should know that how other people live, their day-to-day, their poverty, all the children don't have what he had. So that's how every day, when he was in India for a couple of years, so most of the days he said, go in the morning, play with the children. So he had to go play with the children, what do we call slums. Okay, those people. So he had the personal knowledge what other people live, how other people live, so how the poor people live. So he had the personal. Gandhiji made him do that. So that was very interesting.
So much humility, so much kindness. And actually, I'm going to say I had not realized that he had passed away. When we were preparing to do this show, I wanted to ask him to do a show with us for his grandfather's birthday, and then I found that he had passed away in this past May. So it's a...
His Peace Center was in Memphis, Tennessee. And that moved to Rochester after his wife, Sunanda, died. Sunanda passed, that was 2007, 2008, 2007.
Oh, boy.
Sunanda passed away. And then he was having problem. And then they moved to Rochester, University Riverside campus. That's when his Peace Center moved. That was 2008. That was
and when I met him, it was 2016. He did.
That was already moved to Rochester.
Yeah.
But before that,
right.
Up to 2008, he was in Memphis, Tennessee.
So, but when he moved, as he was close to us in Rochester, I met him in 2016 when he came as a speaker for the Sister Karen Klimczak Center for Nonviolence. Our partner in Camp Peace Prince and in lots of other things. And his humility was so incredible. It was so, he would not allow anybody to take the dust off his feet, anything like that. And then the other time was at, he did an event that we were part of with, and I was privileged to be there with, a part of that event with Niagara University in 2019. So those are, fairly recent. Then, of course, we had the COVID, and then he actually was in India when he passed.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, he again, living by his grandfather's example of that courage, of speaking truth to power, of standing on principle, and of that extreme humility, and that wonderful awareness that he had of and that wonderful love and compassion for different peoples, and that no different people should, ethnic or religious groups should be penalized by other groups. So that is where he got in trouble with the questions about Israeli and Palestinian, the oppression, the occupation, because when they say, the land without a people for a people, the people without a land, a land without a people for a people without a land. It wasn't a land without people. So there were already people there. And there were all kinds of political reasons that happened the way it did, which didn't, back to, the Allied, the British and the Americans trying to keep a foothold in that area to protect their oil and gas interests. But anyway, his gentleness and his love and generosity, just so amazing.
It's really awesome that you guys got the pleasure to meet Arun Gandhi. I did not, but it just shows how people may pass away, but the ideas that they have and the legacy that they hold, it carries on from generation to generation. And how our ideas and what we say, what we do, they have an impact, and even after we pass away.
Right.
So that is very inspiring. And I also want to talk about, because on the Gandhi Institute at the University of Rochester, they have some of the things that they do is in like nonviolence education. So they have like a nonviolence toolkit. They even educate people on environmental nonviolence. And I know I listened to a TED Talk who featured by Arun Gandhi, and he mentioned how an encounter with his grandfather about an incident when his grandfather told Gandhiji to go get a pencil, and he said he needed a new pencil or something like that, and he told him something about the value of reserving resources, and how, Vicky, which you brought up also, like how poverty is also a violence, and how our greed, human greed, can initiate this violence, and not only to other people but to our environment. And maybe if Dr. Sinha, you want to speak on the importance of cows in Hindu culture, how cows are a symbol of nonviolence, and why some people decide not to eat cows or slaughter them.
But we talk about Hindus in many places. One thing always being asked is the holy cow. Now, this is of many misunderstandings. This is one major misunderstanding of the Hindus, particularly in India. Cow is sacred. Many Hindus consider cow sacred, is a goddess, that kind of thing, that kind of sacred, that kind of respect. Don't forget one thing. India, from the ancient time, has been agricultural country. And in the early days, they didn't have tractor. So look at cows. Cows is the wealth. Cows, they consider cows as vulnerable. This is so much valuable. Everything
Yes.
cows is important. Because what do you get from cows? Okay, the bulls would till the land, and the other cows, they will pull the load. The cow will give the milk, which is the major food. Many, particularly those just many Hindus were nonviolent and vegetarian, and the source of protein is milk, and the dependent on milk was enormous. They use yogurt, they use cheese, they use milk, and it's life-giving, it's life-supporting.
Mm-hmm.
So cow is so important in the society. If you kill cow for the meat,
Right.
then you are destroying is the major wealth. You are destroying the major resource of the society.
Right.
Cow became sacred. Cow became worshipable, so that you revere, and that is the whole. In the scriptures, I have studied many of them. Nowhere it says do not eat cow. No, but it always says revere cows. It doesn't say the other thing. It doesn't say don't kill. It doesn't say respect. I mean, this is the positive way. They preserve the cows, the positive ways. But I don't know. I mean, of course, no Hindu would eat cow meat. But if they did, there is no prescription for punishment. I have not seen any.
Mm-hmm.
But it always prevents, or it always protects. But the other thing is, this is part of Indian life. This is part of Hindu life, is nonviolence. This is not killing.
Right.
But because of the cows are special, because of the other reasons. But in general, it's not killing. Nonviolence is the general trend.
Right.
That's the myth about the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, it's so important that's talking about nonviolence. So the UN declared Day of Nonviolence that is selected to be Gandhiji's birthday. October 2nd, they picked as the day to just uphold and revere and contemplate and work on nonviolence, which is, again, as you said, Dr. Sinha, Dilip, so far from where we are. There is so much violence, and some of it is subtle, some of it is structural, and some of it is just very direct, and some of it's person to person, and some of it is state to state. So war itself being, the epitome of violence, or, more and more states taking things into their own hands, where I want to say, one of the things that just happened, that, there is, I don't know how, what kind of proof there is right now, but apparently that in Canada, the Sikh who was killed, a Canadian citizen who was murdered in broad daylight, and Prime Minister Trudeau has said that he believes that was an act that was perpetrated by the state. Well, we know that states are doing that kind of thing. We know that our country has done that kind of thing with drone warfare on our own citizens, as well as other, other citizens that may or often have not been people that are terrorists, because they've oftentimes they've killed the same person. They think it's the person, but they're wrong. So then they've claimed to kill the same person up to 7 times. So it's not that the U.S. is so blameless, but I mean, Saudi Arabia and what happened with Jamal Khashoggi. So there's on the state sponsored over on individual or on the I mean, there's just a huge amount of violence going on by states, and yet we have some international laws that have been agreed to by the countries, and yet we have not found a way of really emphasizing and building the culture around that. So that's one of the things I like to talk about, and I want to quote Gandhi on one of my favorite sayings of his is, if we want to have peace, we must start with the children. So, I mean, some of the work that we do at Camp Peace Prince or at Peace Jam, some of the actually nonviolence courses at the Western New York Peace Center has taught, both, as wanted, as needed, and especially before any big protests, of which for a while there were many, and quite big, up to 5,000 people. So here in Buffalo. So some of the studying on nonviolence that needs to be filtering through so that people really believe in it, as you said, Dilip, that he really believed in it and he struggled to live by it in every way that he could, and more as his life went on, that we can also do the same and try to instill that as well.
And some of when we think of state-sponsored violence, these are all carried out through people who are in high places that don't think of other people's lives, and they think that they should take action upon themselves to create their vision, impose their beliefs and viewpoints on other people, and it ends up. And the U.S. is one of the examples of, violence towards other countries.
Mm-hmm.
We have a colonial past, and just like Britain, even though it may not be as significant and as long, but we do have a colonial past,
Mm-hmm.
and it even goes for like the Native Americans on this land. So that was one way that America was violent in the past, and I think some of the things that Gandhi wanted to uphold is the idea of unity and or tolerance towards other people of faith and other people of that have different traditions that he may not believe in, and for the Sikh activist who unfortunately was killed, he was a minority, and I think that there's something to be said through his death. Why are we not embodying the values that Gandhi was trying to put forth in his lifetime? Why are we abandoning it? And is it just easier for us to choose violence? Is that why we're doing it? Is there another way to go about it that we're not thinking about? So I think maybe we can talk about how India is India still holding true to Gandhi's values of nonviolence? Is the Prime Minister is he in agreement with Gandhi's values of nonviolence?
Sameria, I'd put a little bit comment here.
Mm-hmm.
It is, I don't know, it's beyond my intellect to comprehend all these things that go on today. Things are a little complicated, not as simple. Like Vicky was talking about this Canadian situation, state-sponsored. Okay, the situation is this gentleman and the the Sikh who was killed, um, right or wrong, he was an Indian, and they started separatist movement in Punjab.
Mm-hmm.
The Punjab, they want a separate country. They want to separate away from India. That's been going on and on. Okay, so he was the leader, and he was wanted by the government. He left the country, and he was sheltered in Canada because Canada has a big population of Sikh. Now the Canadian government don't want to do anything. Now, according to international law, this person is a criminal because he fled away from India while he was charged. So he fled away from one country, and now the Canada government will actually, I don't know whether they would support him, but they will not do anything, because if they do something, the Canadian Sikhs will get upset and they will not vote for him. So just to protect himself, Trudeau, he says he looks the other way. And this gentleman, he keeps on starting against India government. And actually, he did like a burning temple, Hindu things. So he had been doing that kind of thing. And Canadian government was looking the other way because of the vote, Sikh votes. So now he's killed. Killed by who? Nobody knows. But they suspect the India government sent somebody to kill him. So now this becomes a state-sponsored violence. So these things are so complicated. I don't know whether it's international law, whether Canada should have repatriated him. But then if he does, then he loses his Sikh votes. So he wouldn't do it. I mean, it becomes so much complicated from the modern day politics that I don't know. But speaking of nonviolence, practicing nonviolence, Gandhiji always said, if you have to pay a price, you pay the price. And there is one example of Indira Gandhi. When she was Prime Minister of India, she was killed by her bodyguard. Her bodyguard was Sikh. And people, and at those times, still they had problems. India is continuously having problem with Punjab. So those days they had problem, and Indira Gandhi suppressed the situation. So people suggested that don't keep any Sikh as your bodyguard. But she had said, no, I trust them. But unfortunately, her bodyguard killed her. So she was practicing nonviolence. She was practicing, but she had to pay the price. But Gandhiji said, if you have to pay the price, you still practice nonviolence. So she did.
So this is what is so important, so interesting that, first of all, very interesting to hear everything that you said about it. And I've had this violence, nonviolence conversation with a lot of people around oppression, especially. And so, and I think of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was killed. It was a Lutheran pastor who was killed by the Nazis because he knew about a plot to assassinate Hitler. And he said, violence is a sin that you take on yourself to protect other people. But so a freedom fighter, what I can say is things are not simple. I agree that so many things are not simple, and that certainly the violence, nonviolence question, I'll never forget when a Black Panther said to me, I was arguing in favor of nonviolence, and he said, well, yeah, he said, but a little crazy glue in a police lock can do a world of good. So, I mean, what is violence? What is really violence? And what is really defending people's rights or other people's rights or something? Or is it a sin that we take on ourselves? The whole thing about power gets things very, very complicated, because Gandhi wanted the unification, right? He didn't want to have Pakistan East and West Pakistan, or, he wanted one country, so, but we fall so short in being able to live together and share power and have shared leadership and have leaders with integrity. It's, of course, it is very complicated. I don't say that isn't. But that is where the principles, so that is what he always and that's what I always come back to, the principles and the spirit. So when we get into it gets murky, we come back to the principles and the spirit, and that can help us find our way through communication and cooperation, listening, and working together to find other solutions. But whoever is doing the killing, the one who does the actual physical violence, then they're definitely, it doesn't mean they are the only one who's wrong, but it definitely means they're wrong. I think that might be, or at least it's one possible way of looking at it.
Dr. Sinha, I think you bring something interesting up is how the example of the bodyguard who was sick and killed the person he was supposed to be protecting, and then what we are seeing today that possibly that this sick activist who was murdered, we don't know who by, but then there's like this, when you take someone from somebody else, and then there becomes this like tit for tat. Well, you killed my beloved. Now I'm going to go after yours, and then there's this cycle because it stems from somewhere that's hurt in us, this hurt that we don't want to let go of, and that's the vicious cycle of violence.
Right. And
what can we learn from that? How do you think we can come to terms with that? And is there any conflict resolution skills that we can adapt moving forward?
So, but the reason I said that is complicated, and sometimes we don't have any control on that. We don't have any, because when it comes to the governments, like even when I don't know, nobody knows whether India government was involved in this killing. If it was, okay, what would say? They would say, why didn't they send this criminal back? They are protecting a criminal. Okay, so do you have to kill for that? No. I would say no, but who knows? I mean, this is the politics. They say we have to protect our country, and this person is like the British was against our country. So this person is against our country. So we have to remove that. I mean, this is really so complicated. Not really simple that nonviolence, okay, forgave him. It solves all the problem. It doesn't. So there are certain times that's beyond our control, beyond our. But what, like Vicky says, it's everyday life. If we practice some nonviolence, the society will be much more peaceful. The society will be much more not violent, because every day we don't practice. I mean, not only physical violence, all sorts of violences we go through.
So I just want to say that's why I think, we study, we meditate, we think of the principles and the spirit, and then we try to do what we can, which means, there are some things we may not have control over, but it doesn't mean that we also don't try to build control over that too, as a collective country, and so that, little ways, in big ways, we can at least try and just do our best to understand, to use those principles and the spirit to make progress in this world.
Yeah,
So-
and ways that people can be more. These are excellent examples of how people can become more violent. We are running out of time.
Right, and and we can become less violent.
Yes, to
Right,
become
that's what we have to.
less violent. Yeah, that's the goal. But together, we have been talking peace and truth and in love. And if there's anything you guys want to add about being less violent, we are running out of time. But some of the ways that I choose to become less violent is I really depend on my own relationship with my Creator and praying, meditation, and reflection, reflecting on His Word that we have received. And that's some of the ways that I think that is best for me to become nonviolent. But thank you, everyone. Thank you, Vicky. Thank you, Dr. Sinha, for joining us and having this conversation with us today about remembering Gandhi and everything he did in his lifetime and his grandson and everything, the ideas and the legacy that he carried on. So together, we've been talking peace in truth and in love.
Peace.
And peace.
Peace. Peace and love. Peace and love. Well, thank you so much. You can hit that fade to black.
Fade to black. Oh, there it is.